Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Football Podcast hosted by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Ethan, alongside host Bryce. Bryce, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. A little tired, but I'm doing good, man. How about you?
You know, it's been a little bit rainy here on the southeastern side of the U.S., but other than that, I've been good. I've been watching a lot of football. There's a lot of big games all throughout the weekend, and we're technically recording this on the big game day for college football. But yeah, man, I'm excited to see some more exciting news, talk some football with you. So let's go ahead and get right on into it. 49ers versus the Vikings. What did you, that game, I didn't expect it to be as, I guess, disappointing as it was. I thought the Vikings had somewhat of a chance just because their defense was really good. But the 49ers was just too much for them to handle, and their offense was kind of non-existent for the most part of that game.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's one of those things where this is what everybody thought Kirk Cousins was going to do last week against the Saints, and obviously also them stopping Dalvin Cook was super important because obviously if Dalvin Cook is stopped, the Vikings offense basically acts like they cannot operate without him being successful on the ground. So it's one of those things where, you know, it's tough, obviously, you know, getting the L, if you're a Vikings fan. But, you know, hey, you basically got further than technically you were supposed to. So you can always take pride in that if you want to look at that as a victory. It just shows you that's why the 49ers are the number one seed in the NFC. They're just one of the most complete teams in the NFC, you know, offensively, defensively. They can beat you in different ways, you know, close games, you know, got a great field goal kicker. They can beat you in a defensive game. They can score with you. So, I mean, you know, it's really one of those games where, you know, you just really saw that the 49ers oppose their will, especially in the second half when they just ran the ball the whole time. Jimmy Garoppolo didn't even take that many throws. It was just run it, and the Vikings couldn't stop it, which was surprising because, you know, the Vikings are usually one of the better defenses in the league, especially in the red zone, and they also couldn't stop the 49ers in the red zone too. So, you know, it's one of those things where I feel like if you're a Vikings fan and you're a Vikings person, you kind of feel like you know the extent of your team with Kirk Cousins. You know, I mean, unless Kirk Cousins just lights it up one day, I mean, you pretty much know what you are. You can tell by the way he plays these big games. He just plays kind of, I don't want to say scared, but he just doesn't play with the same confidence as he plays maybe against a mediocre defense. And, you know, it's kind of a shame because with the weapons that Minnesota has, I mean, honestly, like they said, if you put any upgraded quarterback on there, the Vikings would be Super Bowl favorites. Like, you could probably put a Russell Wilson on there, or you could probably put maybe, you know, maybe even with Kyler Murray, they may be even better. Just because, you know, obviously Kyler Murray showed he could play in Arizona with the team they had. So I just feel like that. I believe Kirk Cousins is coming up on his last year of his 3-year deal he signed with them. So you got one more year. Unless they extend him, I don't know if they're going to. If you do that, then the fans might be a little irritated. But this will be a last year coming up next year. So we don't know what's going to happen next year. Obviously, they'll probably still be a good team next year. They'll probably still be competing for a playoff spot next year. Or things can crumble, and then that just means, okay, yeah, Kirk Cousins is definitely out of here. But, you know, I think as a 49ers fan, you should be happy. Obviously, it's something that you should expected. And now you're just going to go on to next week in the AFC Championship game and try to represent the Super Bowl for the first time since, I believe, 2014, 2015. Whatever the year they beat Baltimore, whether they ever lost to Baltimore, that was the last time they represented. And I think, you know, they're going to be a tough out for any team that plays them just because of how talented they are, how physical they are. And especially also one thing that's helping the 49ers is that they're getting healthy at the right time. Obviously, Kawhi Alexander came back. D Ford came back. So they're definitely getting healthy, and they're playing their best football at the time. So, that's really my thoughts. What about you, Ethan?
Well, the 49ers have the best, I guess the best player in the NFC right now, which is George Kittle. And I don't know if it's even close at this point. I remember, Eric Kendricks is the best cover linebacker in the NFL, and it just was not even fair what George Kittle is able to do. He's really he's getting towards Gronk territory as far as guardability and just him being just a total matchup nightmare for every defense he faces. And he just doesn't look like he's phased whenever he's going up against somebody. He just always takes the punishment towards other people in the game. And he's just so physical and so strong and fast, and he just has all the tools. And he just was not. No one really saw this coming because he wasn't one of those highly sought draft picks. He just kind of fell through the cracks and just developed into this beast of a player. So you look at that. I don't really know if the Green Bay would have a chance to really do anything against that matchup because you're gonna have to assign people to try and stop that to some degree. And once you start doing that, that's when the run game starts going. And the 49ers are so fast. Mm-hmm. They're a really, really fast team. And you don't really think about it just because of the way their offense is concerned or just is built upon, not making mistakes and, getting it to Kittle and then running the football. But Mozart is super fast. Of course, Emmanuel Sanders can still do some things in the passing game. And, Jimmy G, when it's time to make a throw, he can produce a bit. This game was more of we got a bunch of weird quarterback games this weekend. One from Tannehill, one from Jimmy G, technically the Kirk Cousins game. But to be honest, it's just they're doing what they need to do to win. And they know what the winning formula is for each one of these teams. They know that it starts with establishing the run. And I suppose Kyle Shanahan has learned the valuable lesson of always keeping with the run game, or else he would probably have a Super Bowl championship at this point. But it was a really, really it was a big statement game, especially for a team that was off for a week. It looked like they looked like the rest was needed and wasn't one of those things where they over-rested and they looked slow and looked sluggish. So I think it was a quality win. And it fortifies what everybody thought going into the playoffs was that the 49ers are probably the best team in the NFC and should be the Super Bowl favorites. So that's really all I see from them. Aside from that, the Vikings just look pretty flat. And they look like they had some life in the first quarter. But you could see that it was going to be an uphill battle for them, and it looked like they were kind of outclassed in a way. And you could see there's a lot of coaching decisions in that game where I just didn't understand. Like Mike Zimmer, at a certain point, they were down quite a bit, and in the second half, and then these were like 4 down territories, and they're just punting each time, like they're not down X amount of points, and. It just didn't look like there was going to be any sort of aggression, and their defense wasn't stopping anybody at that point anymore because they've been on the field so many times. And this is what I predicted when the Saints played the Vikings this year, was that if the Saints can get on top and they can stop the run game, the Vikings really don't have a way of getting back into deep holes in deep point differential games. And we saw that this time against the 49ers to where they couldn't really claw themselves back out of a tough outing, especially after they scored the first touchdown. There was really nothing more that they could really do about that. And Dalvin Cook was kind of a non-factor for a majority of the game. Stephon Diggs got the one touchdown, but other than that, he was kind of pedestrian as well. So it's just going to be interesting thinking how they move forward as a organization. But we're going to take a quick break, and then coming back, we're going to talk about the other playoff game that happened on Saturday. That's coming up.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. Last time we were speaking about the Vikings 49ers game, and now we're going to push on forward just like Mr. Push On Forward, Derrick Henry. Talk about some Titans Ravens, which was probably the most topsy-turvy game of the weekend, where no one actually expected the Titans to dominate. They could have made a game out of it. I think a lot of people thought the line was too high. If you're a betting people, you know, the line was a bit high, and the Titans are a good team, but we thought that the offensive explosion, which are the Ravens from the regular season, would show up for the playoff game and handle their business, but that just didn't. They looked so out of sync. They didn't look like they played for a long time, and it really showed that maybe they rested too much before the playoffs started, and at the end of the day, the Titans are kind of clicking on all cylinders at the perfect time. It's really feeling like one of those Manning runs, like the Eli runs right now, but instead of it being Eli Manning getting hot, it's just Derrick Henry is carrying the whole state of Tennessee on his back. And
King Henry.
He is he's the best running back by far in the playoffs. Might be the best running back in the league, having one of the craziest rushing performances in recent memory. Like, this might be the greatest rushing performance we've ever seen. If he continues on this track. He ran for 180 3 straight games. That's insane. In the playoffs. It's one thing to have 3 of them in the playoffs, 3 of them in a row. In a row, bro. How can you do this?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, I think it was also impressive about it is because a lot of the teams know they're going to run and they still can't stop it. That's also one of the things that makes Derrick Henry's run very impressive. But fun question for you though. Guess how many yards Derrick Henry had his last senior year in high school?
It was 4,000.
Yes, it was 4,000 yards. So if you know anything, I'm making this there in high school. That man had to average basically 350 to 400 yards a game. So that was he probably scored 40 points himself for his high school team, and they probably went undefeated. And he was that big in high school too, so he's always been a bigger than life player, or always bigger than the opposing team. Also, he's also helping make a case that running backs are still very much relevant in the league today. Obviously, if you think about, again, what you said last segment about, the running game, the running backs are becoming very important again because you're seeing that the teams that run the ball are having the most success in the playoffs. And the Titans are the biggest indicator of that because they've basically, I don't think Ryan Tannehill combined has thrown more than 20 to 25 passes in the entire playoffs so far.
He doesn't have 200 yards passing yet.
Yeah, he doesn't also have 200 yards passing, but he has about 3 touchdowns, I think. There's 3. So, I mean, so basically that's a great formula to have, knowing you don't even have to ask your quarterback to sit here and throw a bunch of throws to win. They can just run it and then still score and still play good defense. Because one thing we also have to look at too is Tennessee's defense is playing some of their best football, because for the last 2 weeks they've led the Patriots to I believe 13, and they had Ravens at 12. And the Ravens are supposed to be a top offense, and they actually scored less than the Patriots. So that should definitely tell you that the Titans are playing at a high level right now. And, we should just give all the credit in the world to Mike Vrabel and that coaching staff. I think Mike Vrabel, in my opinion, has outcoached the last two coaches. He's gotten his team ready for these games, and Tennessee's always been a team that was a good team. They had talent, they had guys. It's just quarterback was not working, which also makes you show you how important the quarterback is. But the quarterback wasn't working, and then they switched to Tannehill, and now look where they are. But on the Baltimore side of things, obviously it wasn't the greatest performance for Lamar Jackson. I mean, yes, and in terms of stats, he had a big stat line, but some people are going to think that's empty calories. And, I just think that, a lot of people, sometimes people say that in the game that, the receivers didn't give him help. Some are going to say, no, Lamar just didn't play well. I mean, you kind of say both happened.
He didn't play well, but they're not empty stats. If you look, there was like a tweet that I saw that was really good where they had 9 possessions where they were inside of Tennessee territory. They just never came up with points at the end of the day. They never scored any touchdowns.
Yeah.
So it was not like they weren't moving the ball and getting into plus territory and stuff like that. They just never got it going. Like they never could finish drives well. And the Tennessee defense, their red zone defense was really, really good that game. So, Lamar didn't have the best game. He didn't have his normal Lamar day that we've seen all season long, but we can't pretend that all of a sudden that Lamar was not good. Like he wasn't serviceable. He had some bad moments. He didn't have like good moments all the time, but he was missing throws that he knows he struggles with, but there are throws that he was making or attempting to make, and a lot of people were letting him down. Like, there's just a lot of out of syncness in it. That's what it turns to, the whole idea of maybe they rested too much.
Yeah, they're out of sync, they're a little rusty.
They look like they really missed Mark Ingram a bit because after the first quarter, it looked like they just kind of stopped running the football. At least to running backs, it was more just either Lamar's running the ball or he's throwing the ball, and that's kind of, you play right into the hands of a team that didn't want somebody to run the football on them like that.
Yeah, and also to a point too is this entire season we really haven't seen Baltimore play from behind, and the last time we did was the last time they lost, which was against Cleveland, and they are not built to play from behind because I feel like most teams in the NFL, when they play from behind, they just start throwing it because you're trying to make back up deficits quickly. And, sometimes running the ball, it's one thing if you're leading and you maybe get a 3-yard run here and a 4-yard run here and you try to get more manageable third downs because you feel like, we have a lead, whatever. But when you're trailing, it's like, if you get like a no gain on first down, you feel like, okay, now we gotta start throwing because, you're trying to catch up, you're trying to keep up, and you're trying to maybe retake the lead. So, I think that this kind of showed that obviously, like I said, Baltimore's not really, they've never been a team that really was built to pass the ball from behind to win a game. But I think that's just the next evolution in Lamar Jackson. Him improving as a passer in a way where even when they're behind, they can still know, okay, Lamar is going to bring us back. Because like I said, right now they always did say their team is built with a lead. Because that running game is where it becomes very deadly when you have the lead when you're Baltimore, because you can run clock and move the ball, and so teams are having less time to come back. Well, also since they're so effective offensively with it, they can still score points. So, I think Baltimore. Some people, it's like they say sometimes you just have your worst game at the worst time, and maybe this was just one of those games. They just had their worst. Honestly, if you think about it, the Ravens some of their key players are banged up. Mark Andrews had a bum ankle. Obviously, Ingram had his calf. There was some guys that's just like, okay. It's weird to say it because you would think, okay, they're still overall a great team, but sometimes that one injury or two injuries, even though it may be to a good player, you just don't think it would change the outcome of the game, but it really could. Because like I said, we don't know what would happen if Mark Ingram was healthy. Now, what you said earlier about they were getting into the plus territory and not making plays, for example, was I believe it's their first possession. I think they were moving down the field after they stopped Tennessee on the first drive, and then Lamar threw it to Mark Andrews, and then he tipped it up in the air, and then it was picked off. That's more of an example of how the night kind of went. Like you said, kind of like moving it, but then just got stopped.
Right.
So I think that's. I mean, honestly, like I said, it was just a good game plan on the Ravens. I mean, on the Titans part, really. And like I said, defensively, you just couldn't really stop Derrick Henry. I mean, don't forget that play where he made Earl Thomas elite blocker.
That's another thing. So I think word to the wise for NFL players: let's hold the trash talk until you win the Super Bowl, because it's not looking good for track records. I remember Stephon Diggs did the chopper style in front of and that went live on social media, and then they got beat down by the 49ers.
Did you see what Michael Thomas was saying during that?
I did. I don't have to talk about that now.
This man was going, I was like, dang, this man was salty.
He said chopper that. So but listen, Earl Thomas said that it didn't look like that team really wanted to tackle Derrick Henry, but we'll see what happens with us. And maybe Derrick Henry just can't be tackled. Maybe that's the hidden formula here. So let's not challenge the Alabama rushing title guy.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
The guy that ran 4,000 yards in college as a quarterback. I'm sorry, in high school. But let's take a quick break, and then we're gonna get into the Sunday games coming up.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, so we talked about the Derrick Henry big runs and Lamar Jackson kind of disappointing performance. And now we're going to get into the Sunday games. The first game of that day happened to be the weirdest game of the group. It was Texans versus the Chiefs, and the Texans came out the gates hot. And by hot, I mean scorching. They scored 21 unanswered points in the first quarter, and people thought the game was done. Mm-hmm. Like, social media they set a fire to Twitter. Twitter was on fire, and
they were worried too, because they were like, oh no, not a Texans-Tennessee AFC championship game. It's just basically the crown for the AFC South.
There was a lot of good jokes going on for that. It was, can they flex this game?
Exactly. Can we just make this like the 1 o'clock, and then we have like 1 o'clock regional?
Send this game to London.
Not London.
So there was a lot of jokes, but then Patrick Mahomes said it's time for the jokes to stop. Mm-hmm. And they scored 7 unanswered touchdowns. 7 touchdowns. Woo. Talk about a flamethrower. Like, this is the Chiefs team that we saw last year, that when they were on all clicking, that there was nothing you could do. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, physically nothing. And this is what I kind of expected, because I didn't think the Texans were that good in the playoffs, and I think they've been skating by ever since. And this is one of those times where I don't think they were allowed to skate by no more, because they didn't really have a good run game going. They didn't have Deshaun hasn't looked the best. He's had spotty moments outside of him, him turning it on and being like phenomenal. Mm-hmm. He wasn't always phenomenal all the time. DeAndre Hopkins had some weird miscues, and he's been having a little bit more of them in the playoffs. That first half of the Bills game was weird, and now it's kind of hard to you have to be good all the time in the playoffs, and you can't mm-hmm. just come out slow, or else you'll get, it'll come back to haunt you. And not to say they came out slow, they scored 21 unanswered points, but those points weren't really a product of them like driving down the field and making real legitimate drives, but more so,
big plays.
Yeah, big plays, and the Chiefs came out a bit flustered, and Patrick Mahomes really didn't touch the ball for like 2 minutes in the first quarter.
Yeah, and then also just the fact that his receivers dropped balls in the first 2 possessions.
Yeah, that too. So there's a lot of fluky stuff going on. So then the universe righted itself, and all of a sudden the Chiefs look like they're the best team in the NFL, because I don't know if there's a team that can really stop that offense when it decides to say enough is enough.
Yeah, you probably have to score with them to beat them. But to your point, obviously remember first segment we were talking about Lamar and how they're not built to come from behind. I always said the one thing about Kansas City is that they want to throw the ball. They want to throw it 50 times, 500 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And so even when you're up on them, it's not over, because you know how explosive that offense is. And you know that really you're not taking them out of their game plan, because their game plan basically is to pass the ball. So you're basically letting them, give an excuse to them to just say, okay, screw the running game altogether and just throw it all over the place. That's why even when it was 24-0, it was an early 24-0. It wasn't like it was third quarter 24-0. It was like, okay, this is like, because I believe they scored 21 unanswered in the first, and they scored a field goal, and then that's when the avalanche came. And then the Chiefs stopped making mistakes. Bill O'Brien made a very questionable coaching decision by going for that fake punt. Don't know why, but that was a very questionable decision. And they just started ripping off, nobody could guard Travis Kelce out there. Mahomes was on fire. Defense played better after that. Only let up one more score, I believe, after that 24-0 start. And basically, like I said, they look like the best team in the NFL. And this is the reason why I think Kansas City, it looks like they have everything in front of them to win it. You have the best offense and probably one of the better, not one of the top, but one of the better defenses because of the improvement. And they didn't even have their best defensive lineman, because their best defensive lineman was hurt this week in practice. So them playing another week, if he can get back next week, that just makes them that much tougher. And I just think that really overall, they just look like they're just, it really feels like, unless, you're going to go against Tennessee next week, it really just feels like, just nothing's going to stop them. They're going to get to the Super Bowl, and hopefully, if preferably, people probably prefer the 49ers, because that would be a great matchup. The 49ers can score points too, so, and it'll be interesting to see who ends up winning that game. But I think that, the Chiefs just like one of the most dominant teams in the league. And also, on Houston's side, a lot of people don't like Bill O'Brien. They feel like he's not that good of a head coach. Their team is very inconsistent, which showed yesterday. Great, then trash. It's just a very inconsistent team. Literally almost every game, you don't know what you're getting from them. So a lot of people are kind of like, I kind of want him to be fired, but they keep winning, so you don't really have a reason to fire him, but you kind of also feel like there's limitations with the team. They have to get some things fixed. Obviously their secondary is a big issue. Their secondary was shredded yesterday, but their secondary has been an issue the whole time. Obviously you have to get the offensive line better too, because, obviously you don't want Deshaun taking all that punishment, even though offensive line didn't play as bad as it usually did. The Chiefs just did a good job in the back end, because I saw a couple of plays where Deshaun had to run around a lot because he was waiting for someone to become open, because they really were locking everybody down. And, this is the preferable outcome, obviously, if you're TV companies, because you don't want Texans and Titans as your AFC Championship game. So they'll be like, okay, yes, we have something that we can actually dig into and market, and people are going to tune into. And I think this is also, if y'all didn't know, a rematch of earlier this year when Tennessee and Kansas City played. Tennessee won, blocking the field goal in the last seconds. So Tennessee actually has a win on Kansas City this year, so they probably can come out of this knowing, okay, we can beat these guys. But I know Kansas City obviously is not the same team they were then too, so I believe that this is going to be a very interesting matchup next week. But like I say, I mean, you gotta say congrats to Houston for the season they had. They just came up short. They know they know what holes that you need to fix. You need to fix your back end. You need to fix your offensive line, and then we'll see what you look like next year. And you're in a conference where, I mean, obviously, I guess if Tennessee is going to be consistent every year, you don't know what's going on with the Colts, and who's the, I forgot who the other team is. That just shows you how it's a 3-man race every year. So, but yeah, and like I said, Kansas City just looks like one of the most dominant teams I think, in the NFL. Because remember, they can score in bunches. Never forget, last year against New England in both games, they only scored 9 points in the first half, and they ended the game with like 40, 45. So they could score bunches, and that was against the Bill Belichick defense. So
now we got to see what does Derrick Henry have left in the tank for this game? Because they played last time, they played in the regular season, and Tennessee lost by 3 points. And this was when they weren't I don't feel like they were playing the best football, but they were playing pretty good. Mm-hmm. And I just don't, if Chris Jones isn't able to play, oh man.
Yeah, you feel like, because Kansas City, you know what they're going to do. They're going to run it.
Everybody knows what Tennessee is going to do.
They're going to run it and play action.
This is like why it's so frightening to watch Derrick Henry do what he does. We know what Derrick Henry is going to do. We know what the Tennessee offense is predicated on. It's just, if you can't stop it with an 8-man box, everybody pressed up at the line, what the Patriots did, and they're a better defense than the Chiefs are, what are you supposed to do? I don't really see the Chiefs being able to stop this. Like any other defense hasn't been able to stop this. They've taken out 2 of the better defensive teams in the AFC. Mm-hmm. And the Chiefs have gotten better, but let's not pretend that the Chiefs don't have a problem stopping the run game when they're really good at it. That's not something that the Chiefs are really good at doing or have been all season long. And they've really improved in their passing defense, but rushing defense is still an issue, especially with no Chris Jones. So if Chris Jones doesn't play, oh boy, there's going to be a bet, like a betting line of whether or not he's going for 180 again. Like,
yeah, that's probably
if it's up, like over or under 180. Like, I just can't see that any other way. And it's going to be interesting because if he can control the clock, by he I mean Derrick Henry, if Derrick Henry can control the clock and keep Patrick Mahomes off the field,
and then score points on top of that,
that is going to. A Titans Super Bowl would it'd
be like, wow.
It'd be the most unexpected thing I've ever seen.
The Super Bowl, like the whole state of Tennessee gonna be watching.
Yeah.
They gonna be like, yes sir, Tennessee Titans, baby, Titans up.
It's going right up next to the Ja Morant posters.
Exactly. They said, yeah, we're coming up this year.
You know how they Photoshop Lamar Jackson and Roddy Ricch on those prominent African American.
Oh yeah.
memes. They're gonna replace Lamar and put Derrick Henry up there.
Oh yeah. They said, well, okay, you know what? Technically, Derrick Henry did take out, certain people, so they should put him on there.
Right. So we're gonna take another quick break, and then we're gonna get into the other game that happened on Sunday.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, so we talked about the other game that happened in the AFC, which was the Chiefs and Texans in the big blowout. And now we're going to go into another game that started off to look like to be a blowout in its own right. And then it became a game later on, and it was a little bit too little too late for the Seahawks as they take the loss against the Green Bay Packers. And what did you see in that game from your perspective, Bryce?
I mean, Packers came out looked like the better team early on, and it just kind of you kind of knew what was going to happen. Obviously, with Russell Wilson, you always have a chance, and you saw that in the second half. But obviously, when they got that stop after they got a stop on Green Bay, That and then Aaron Rodgers put the game away. I think that just shows you how clutch the Packers are with such a elite quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. I think that obviously the Packers, the free agent acquisitions of the Smiths have really changed this team. They really dominated yesterday in the game, especially I think I don't know if it was Norris or how you say it, but he dominated the game. Preston Smith made a couple of plays, and obviously overall the Packers 28 points, that's a good showing at home. I think a lot of people obviously had a lot of questions about Green Bay because of the fact that they were in a lot of close games with a lot of teams that you would think they should be much better than. And they were in tight competition, especially that last game against Detroit where they almost lost to Detroit and almost lost their chance to be a second seed. And I think that really, you look at everything and I just think to myself that, the Packers, they have a formula. They have a running game. They need to run the ball. And Rodgers is a good enough quarterback to make plays through the air. And then, Jimmy Graham really showed up yesterday for the first time in a while. And obviously we know Devontae Adams is his best receiver, one of the most underrated number one receivers in the league. So, if they continue to play this way, because they're going to be going for the rematch with the 49ers in the NFC Championship game, and I think they got to play better than they played when they played in the regular season where they got shellacked. So, people think that the Packers are a finesse team, not a physical team, and this is their chance to show that they can be just as physical, going up to San Francisco. But but on the Seattle side, like I said, all those injuries to running back really showed. They were a top 10 in running and passing, but you lost all your running backs. They really couldn't run the ball as much. Now, obviously, in the goal line, you got Marshawn back in the team. That'd probably be perfect for you. But outside of that, it was very non-existent, really, the running game. And Russell Wilson kind of had to do everything, basically, to even give that team a shot to win the game. Like I said, good congrats to Pete Carroll and those guys. Had a good season. They played hard. They played as well as they could with the injuries and the limitations that they had on their team. It just makes you wonder, what if they were healthy at running back? How far could have Seattle maybe potentially gotten? Would have we gotten an NFC West rematch in the NFC Championship game? And it's just one of those things you probably will never know now. We just gotta go on to the next. But I think like I said, this game was a good one. Obviously, like I said, like that last drive, Aaron Rodgers making those two throws on third down to seal the game was big. Obviously, there was a very controversial call with the Jimmy Butler play. I mean, not Jimmy Butler, the Jimmy Graham play, where he caught it, and some people thought he got stopped short, and they ruled it that he was ahead. Even on replay, some people think you could have saw it on replay, but they didn't know where to spot it, so they were just like, we have to let it stand. I mean, did you have any thoughts on that play? Did you think he was stopped short, or did you think he made the first down?
I think it was a tough call. Like, at some angles, it looked like he might have been stopped short by by a centimeter, but it didn't look like you could really overturn it just because it just didn't seem like there was enough evidence. This is like one of those rare occasions to where like the whole idea of like not enough evidence to overturn. It just didn't. There was no clear point to where he stopped and the ball was where it was at. Would I have been mad if they overturned it? No.
No,
but
I don't think anybody would have been mad either. Because it's controversial. You're going to have your people. Obviously, Green Bay fans are going to say he made it, and Seattle fans are going to say he didn't. Yeah,
and that's just the end of it, to be honest. I just find it funny how Jimmy Graham was in the middle of that play, who played for both teams at the time.
He did.
I just think it's a culmination of what the Seattle Seahawks end up dealing with sometimes, and that's they always have to kind of fight from behind. You never really have a all out interesting Seahawks game win where they dominate or they control the ball. There's always something going on in the Seahawks game where people are questioning stuff or panicking. And that's what the game was really out of reach for a while until Russell Wilson decided to put the team on his back and just will some touchdowns in there. And until that point, you don't really know what to do. And then there was a punt that they had in the fourth that some people thought they should have went for it, but they decided to punt the ball and trust their defense.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I would have punted the ball in this situation, especially when you feel like the momentum was kind of shifting towards the Seattle side. And then
you don't know if you'll get the ball back.
Yeah. And of course, they didn't get the ball back, and that just kind of sealed the deal for that game, really. And
yeah, I mean, the worst. I mean, to me, if they had kept it, even if they had a turnover on downs, if you could get a stop there, and the Packers got a field goal, you'd still be a 1-possession game. So for me, I felt like you would be fine if you did it. It's just better to go for it and have that chance than give it up. And then I honestly feel like it was bad because you gave them more length of the field. So now they could get it. They're not going to be as close. So it's like, you know, they can get from like the 10 to the 50 instead of being already maybe at the 40, where it's like, okay, well, either you're stopping them from scoring or maybe you're kicking the field goal. And so that could result in, you know, potentially you getting one more possession for Russell Wilson. And, you know, Russell Wilson, you know, he'll always try his darnest to get you back in it and win the game in the clutch. You know, that's why they had such a great record in 1-possession games this year. But, you know, it was just one of those things where, like I said, Aaron Rodgers was just too clutch because, you know how some coaches are. They'll just run the ball on third down. Like, we're just going to waste some clock. But, you know, when you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, you trust him and you trust that he'll get you to win. And that's what he did. He said, like, okay, I'll make the right decision, and he did. And I was able to give him the win. So, you know, like I said, congrats to Green Bay going against San Francisco next week in the rematch from earlier this year. So, you know, but, you know, I mean, one thing I do hope, though, next week is that the game is more competitive between the two. Because obviously you don't want your NFC Championship game being a blowout, you know? So,
well, that's the fear for all these last two games, is that they have very, very big blowout potential just because of the stakes. Like, Kansas City is a barn burner offense, and, you know, Tennessee is a more so a methodical, or not really methodical. I don't like to say that for Tennessee. Tennessee is I'm going to punish you.
Yeah.
We are going to make you hate playing football team. They're going to run it down your throat every possession, every play. We don't care.
And you never know when that big play is going to come from Tannehill in the passing game. And then, because they have receivers, so.
Right. And then, you know, the 49ers defense is top tier. And they also run the ball a lot, and they like to be very balanced on offense. And Green Bay doesn't play good games all the time, and they can kind of get caught lacking in different games and different scenarios. So you never really know which Green Bay is going to show up, and that's just kind of where it's at. But we're going to go ahead, take another quick break, and then we're going to get into some general NFL news and topics.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right, so we just finished up wrapping up the playoff, I guess, look back on the last few games that were played over the weekend, and now we're headed into just some news that's been popping around the NFL, just some stuff that we've seen over the weekend. One of the bigger segments rolling around in the Twitterverse and on talk shows is the hiring of the Browns' new head coach, coming straight from
Minnesota.
Yep. And It's just, I don't know. Is it an underwhelming hire to you?
I mean, I think a lot of people were very surprised. I mean, the thing about it is when they hired Freddie Kitchens, he was actually the second runner-up. He was the guy they wanted after him. So this year, or I think the reason why some people were surprised is because obviously you saw the playoff performance that the Vikings offense put up. And some people thought after a performance like that, you're going to hire him. And then also they interviewed a lot of guys. A lot of people thought it was going to be Josh McDaniels because they thought that was the best candidate left out there. I mean, a lot of people even thought it was a done deal because, Josh McDaniels brought his wife and everything, but I guess not. I guess they said, no, we don't want him. And, basically, even Richard Sherman said something about it because they had interviewed the 49ers defensive coordinator too, and he was just like, wow, so this is what we're doing? You're going to hire him over my guy? So I feel like obviously it's a very mixed reaction. I think a lot of people are just like, it's not really this head coaching period has been very weird. It just feels like there's a lot of underwhelming hires. Because you feel like you have all these young up-and-coming guys, and then none of the up-and-coming guys, or none of the other guys really got hired. It was Mike McCarthy, underwhelming. Joe Judge, who dat? I mean, Kevin Stefanski. I mean, I'm not saying he's not good. I'm just like, it's just, only really big one was the Redskins getting Ron Rivera. And so, I mean, it just felt like with this hire, it's just another one of those head coaching. It's just like, obviously, it's just like, what is the goal here? And then obviously, it wasn't as many firings as maybe you thought because the Jags kept Doug Marrone and, the Falcons kept Dan Quinn and just, there's just a lot of unsureness, I feel like, within things happening here. And I think that, I mean, Cleveland fans might have some issues at first and everything, but we'll have to see. And did you hear about the request they made of every head coach that they interviewed?
No, what did they?
They actually require that all the head coaches, if they get the job, that they give their game plans and everything. They show the game plan to the owner and the analytics team every week. And usually that never is asked by any head coach because the owner's never involved in all that. And it's just like, why as the owner would you need to see the game plan? Like, are you going to tell him what they need to do? And you're an owner. Like, I mean, if you're an owner, like, I mean, listen, you might know something about football, but I don't know if I trust you to tell me what my game plan should be. And then the analytics team, which I mean, some teams do analytics to try to figure out what they do, but even that is just like, okay, this kind of made me worried about the structure of how this is going to go. So if they out here passing the ball against the team they should be running the ball against because analytics say pass it and they suck, okay, we know who we know to direct it to. But, I think this also could be good just because this offense coordinator who a lot of people might say he doesn't have the greatest experience, but he's been an offense coordinator for a while. I think this could be a friendship that could work with Baker because this is very important that he can work with Baker and help Baker get the best out of him. They said that he's done well with quarterbacks in the past, so, and he's able to maximize potential because, a lot of these guys they always hire say, oh, they are used to maximizing the potential of quarterbacks. So, I mean, hopefully, he can come out there and maximize Baker, reduce the interceptions, increase the touchdowns. And then obviously, since he's the head coach, he knows what he needs to fix. Offensive line. We need to get that straight. We need to protect Baker. Baker is shorter, so we need to protect him. Also, maybe change some of his habits, because you can kind of zero in on Baker's habits. And also, don't forget to use Nick Chubb. He was the leading rusher, and then you let him lose the title because you stopped running the ball. So, if you can make those changes, I think Cleveland will be straight because, Cleveland does have one of the better receiving corps, one of the best duos in running back, one of the best defensive lines when Myles Garrett get back from suspension. And they have some players. They have talent. Coaching was not good. And hopefully if he can improve the coaching, then that's what's going to get him to actually in good graces with Cleveland. It's not, the only thing I also say about Cleveland too is it's not like this is a team where it's like, the team is bad and you're trying to rebuild it. It's the team has talent. We just need you to coach it correctly. Because technically, if they can get it right, they can make the playoffs next year if they keep all the talent and they add some stuff. So it's not like this is like a job where it's like, yeah, you're going to have a bad year coming up. It's like you have some guys. You just got to get everybody on the same page. You got to be a leader. You got to be a tough alpha male in that locker room with Odell and all of them. And you got to do what you got to do to help get the best out of them. You know what I'm saying? So, I think that was, so I think the hiring was interesting, but like I said, it was a little awkward, but, a little weird. But the entire head coaching searches for a lot of these teams were weird. Well, what did you think about it?
I don't know. I want to know the over-under on him staying there for longer than a year. I don't know, because they didn't give they gave Freddie Kitchens 1 year and they got him out of there, right? Mm-hmm. And Freddie Kitchens went 6-10. So if this team theoretically has another 6-10 or below season, are they keeping him? Are they going to let him stay for another year? Like, I guess it really just depends on if they see if the same issues occur, then is it the coach or is it the team? Or is it the owner? Like, it's just a weird organizational thing. Because firing your coach year after year is not the solution. You got to be able to build a culture.
Stability.
Yeah, stability, and you got to be able to move some things around. I think the first thing that they're probably going to consider before they fire their coaches is moving another piece. So that might be Odell or something like that. If it doesn't work out, and Odell still hasn't, I guess, worked out as far as the stats and the big playability stuff hasn't come together, I think they would look to move him or Landry or something like that and try to salvage something about this. But at the same time, I just don't know if this is the hire that's going to get it done. I think he has 2 years in him because that's the general amount of time.
Yeah.
That
unless it's like you have a rebuilding process, then you might get that third.
Right. And, or like if Baker were to get hurt or something like that, right?
Yeah.
They're not just going to fire him because Baker got hurt. They'll give him some time to, see what they can do with Baker if he were to return, things like that. So, there's weird scenarios to where he can get to 3 years, but I have a hard time seeing that even being hard seeing him get to 2 years. He might get to 1 year and then it might be he might get to the half year. If the Cleveland doesn't turn it around, it's going to be a tough go.
Yeah.
Because I think at this point, their division is going to be really tough.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I feel like Cincinnati, they're not to say that they tanked because I don't think NFL teams tank. They're just that bad.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
people thought Miami tanked and they won 5 games.
Well, so. I mean, Miami did try and tank the first few games of the season and then they turned it around. Because at the end of the day, NFL teams don't really like tanking. It's bad for business.
Yeah. And
it's just too competitive of a league to where like teams are too good to tank.
And players don't want to, since football is such a physical game, they don't want to be on like, we're purposely trying to lose.
Right. That's just not something they do. So it's going to be a real tough go to see a team like Cincinnati not improve, especially when they get the first overall, and then there might be people attracted to go there in free agency, and then if they get their defense in order, they can return back to what they used to be under Marvin Lewis.
The Andy Dalton here.
I mean, like Marvin Lewis, people gave him a lot of flack for losing in playoff games and stuff, but he made playoff games. There are a lot of coaches that did not make playoff games that had just as long as tenures, like the guy who got fired, like the Cowboys' previous head coach. He didn't get to the playoffs that often as much as Marvin Lewis did, I don't believe. And, there wasn't as much criticism going his way as much as it did Marvin Lewis for him not being able to get through. And, there's some unlucky things in Marvin Lewis's tenure. It looked like they'd win games and all of a sudden, Vontez Burfict. And then just problematic after problematic occurrences would come out of that. And then, of course, you have the Steelers who are going to look like they're going to be a better team next year no matter what. If they have to draft a new quarterback or if they bring Big Ben back, who says he wants to come back and play.
Their defense is
their
legit,
defense is
so
nice.
You just got to get the offense right. And then Baltimore probably going to be good. And then, like you said about Cincinnati, one thing about Cincinnati people forget, Cincinnati has some talent. It's not like they're untalented. They have a running back in Joe Mixon, who's one of the better running backs in the league. AJ Green has been hurt the entire year. And we don't know if he's going to keep him, but if they keep him, we still would think he's still a number 1 receiver in the game, plus some good other receivers too. And if Tyler Eifert can remain healthy, then you have a tight end. You just got to fix the defense on the offensive line. And then if Burrow come in there, because we all think he's going to be the consensus number 1 pick for him, I mean, he could, Cincinnati can make some noise. And technically, some people might sit here and say, when they drafted Joe Burrow, Baker's the 4th best quarterback in their own division.
Right.
So it's just really one of those things where that's why you would hope they can turn it around, because you don't want to draft a guy and put all this money into the team and then you just don't get results.
Right.
Especially in the division year.
And I said that I believe I said that on my college football podcast where it was the reason why tanking doesn't work for draft picks high is because if you show that you're incompetent, no one wants to play for you. Mm-hmm. Your team doesn't want to play for you. People don't want to come into a bad organization. It's the same reason why you see rumors that pop up. And they'll be like, oh, this team might be getting the first overall pick, and they're like 0-8, and all of a sudden the guy who's projected to go number 1 is reconsidering going back to school. And it happens sometimes it happens in college basketball, rarely, but sometimes, you hear like, oh, this guy's mulling over the draft pick and stuff like that, just because, they need to see that you're going to make all efforts to, be better. But, we're going to take another break, and then we're going to get into the last segment of the day.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
All right, so we were just talking about Cleveland's hiring of their new head coach, Stefanski. That's how you pronounce it? Stefanski? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now we're going to get into more coaching topics, as we just want to see who do we think the head coach is going to be coming out the gate, either returning head coach back into the football ranks or a new fresh blood. Who's going to have the biggest turnaround for their team and have the best kind of season? Who are you thinking, Bryce? Because I think I have 2 in mind, but so I think one. It's been a toss-up. I have 3 really, but I have one that I believe is the safe pick, but it's so safe that I feel like it's going to fail me. And of course, I feel like the Cowboys are they just have all the talent to do it, right? Mm-hmm. So why not pick them? Mike McCarthy is a good enough coach. I mean, he's thought of as the guy who wasted Aaron Rodgers, but they made the playoffs quite often. They got a Super Bowl. They went 15-1, mm-hmm. and he's a good coach. I wouldn't see how that just doesn't work out for them to get some games and win the NFC East now. But at the same time, I look at someone like Ron Rivera, and I think the Redskins have had a lot of talent that's been wasted for quite some time. And it depends on if they think Haskins is the guy or not. But say they can make Haskins work. Don't you think that'd be like the biggest turnaround story of the NFL? Like the Redskins being competent and being good?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you feel like in Division 2 that they play in, they have a chance to be a team that can turn around and do it. They just got to get some things right. Got to get that offensive line straight. They've had a lot of issues too with just some ownership and some issues with their own players. I remember what happened with Trent. I believe it was Trent Williams early in the season where he wanted to get paid. I think he wanted to get paid and they refused to pay him, and so he just sat out the entire year. And
then the tumor thing.
Yeah,
happened,
and then we found out about the tumor thing. It was a mess there, and just Redskins have been a messy organization. So I think that if Ron Rivera can come and turn around, that would be probably the biggest turnaround in terms of the most work you have to do to get a team to become relevant and competitive in the NFL. The team that I think could be good out the gates is the New York Giants with Joe Judge.
Really?
Yeah, because the reason why I say that is one thing we have to think about the situation. I also thought outside of the Cowboys job, that was the best job available. Because the Giants have a lot of talent already in place. You have your quarterback, you have your running back, you have some good receivers, you have your tight end, you got a pass rusher. You just got I feel like you know what you got to fix. You just got to upgrade the offensive line. If you can get you a number 1 receiver, if you possibly can, but and you just got to fix the back end of the secondary. And I mean, Joe Judge, I think a lot of people obviously didn't know who he was. He wasn't even somebody that people talked about as this up and coming candidate, but I'm sure he took some things from learning under Coach Belichick. Obviously, I hope he isn't like Matt Patricia and tries to completely adapt to the system in Detroit. But I think he's going to do what he thinks is necessary. And I think that, like I said, with all that talent, offensively, I feel like they should be a top team with the talent they have. Because if they get the offensive line right, why couldn't Daniel Jones have a great season offensively through passing game? Golden Tate's one of the best slot receivers in the game. Sterling Shepard's an underrated receiver. Darius Slayton, the rookie from this past year, made some plays. And then we all know Saquon Barkley, he's one of the best running backs in space. And then if Avery Ingram can stay healthy, they have guys. They really do. And like I said, they have some pass rushers on defense. They have pieces in place. And obviously, the key for the head coach is to put the pieces in place and create a system that works. Because, he talked about being a special teams coach and saying, well, when you're special teams, you kind of have to know everybody. So you know who's the best people to put in special team situations. Because you have to learn really every player. Because it's like, you never know. You might have to ask a starter that, hey, we need you out here because we feel like you're going to give us the best chance to maybe have a successful special teams play. And if he really does all that and really analyzes what they need to do so they can be competitive, and again, in a division where you would think Dallas would be better. You would think the Eagles would be better because the Eagles were hurt, Dallas just coaching-wise. But even with that, the NFC East can either be the worst division in football or the best division in football. With the way they sometimes range over the past few years. And I feel like they just have what it takes to be competitive if they get the right stuff in place and he has a good plan in place. I think that's another reason why some people are surprised by it, because they're like, you can hire someone a little bit more promising, I guess, to go with a promising team, but we'll have to see, really. I mean, if it ends up being a failure, then everybody's gonna look at it. It's like, why did you hire him in the first place? But I also feel like, in terms of pieces in place, he has one of the better chances to be successful starting out of the gate. So,
I see. I have just one more, and then we can wrap it up. But I think who they hired out of Carolina, who is
Matt Rule.
Matt Rule. I think he is in a position to where the team seems to have a identity. Well, they had an identity with Ron Rivera, but the pieces there, you can still form a similar identity because Christian McCaffrey, it was that whole offense. Mm-hmm. As soon as Cam went down,
Blue Eyes White Dragon.
Clearly they still have some weapons. Like their wide receiver core DJ Moore is really good. Greg Olsen can still do some things in the passing game.
Curtis Samuel's a good gadget wide receiver.
Exactly. So their offense still has some pieces there that can be immediate contenders in the NFC South. Mm-hmm. Along with their defense was never bad per se. It was just that as soon as they realized that it was kind of getting close to the done state, they had no more playoff contention hopes. They kind of shut it down. So really, he's working with a lot of good pieces, and the NFC South fluctuates kind of on a whim. Mm. So, as a fan of one of the teams in the NFC South, I'm very much aware that anything can happen. One day, maybe if they bring back Jameis down there, the Buccaneers, they go 5-0, and the Saints go 2-3, and the Falcons go 4-1, and Carolina finds a way to get some wins, and they're like 4-1 or 3-2 or whatever. They can stay in the race, and it's not always a predetermined thing. Like, this isn't like other teams, especially in the AFC where it's really top heavy. Mm-hmm. This is that division is always competitive for the most part, and it can get really, really. That's when those divisional games get so important, because you just never really know who's going to come out on top, really, until like the last few weeks of the season. If the division's super competitive. Mm-hmm. So I see Matt Rule. I mean, he got the 7-year. 7-year 70, something like that?
I believe so. His coach is getting that player money now.
Yeah, so he's getting paid, so they're gonna see him do this for the long haul. And now it's just what they're gonna do with their quarterback situation. I think they're gonna bring back Cam Newton for one more year at least, but at the same time, you never really know, because I don't think we saw enough from their backups to really prove that Cam Newton is they're worse off without Cam, or they're better off without Cam than with him. And you just have to see if Cam is healthy and if he can still play at a high enough level to be a starter these days. But that's where we're going to leave the podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing if you subscribed, and if you haven't, why not? Please leave a like and review the podcast. 5 stars, 5 stars. And don't forget to follow us on social media, being Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. This has been the GSMC Football Podcast, hosted by me, Ethan, and Mr. Bryce. And I hope you have a wonderful day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.